Well, there we go. There we go. Thank you. Okay, let's call the meeting of the Washington County Quorum Court County Services Committee to order.
Sorry.
Would I ask Ms. Ecke, J.P. Ecke, to lead us in the prayer and pledge?
Thank you, Justice Bowman. Bow your heads and pray with me, please. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that you're the creator of all things and you created us. May we always be mindful and respectful of who we are in you. And so now we ask that you would enable us to do that which you have called us to do with grace and peace. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Amen.
Have a motion about the agenda?
I'll make a motion, we pass it the way it is.
Second.
We have a motion, second, pass it as it is. Any objections, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, any unfinished business? Okay, no unfinished business. We move on to number 5, around the county. Mr. Gales, give us an update. We know you got lots going on.
I did it. Well, first, around the county, it's sort of around the judge's county.
All right.
So, because I can't keep up with the rest of them. The first thing that I want to bring forth, the judge had an excellent meeting this morning with the OGC, a group from Michigan. I didn't realize that we have to have federal accreditation for these CSUs, but they came down, did an inspection, and it was a very good report and very good meeting that he visited, lasted most of the morning. So the CSU is the first thing I want to say. We're on the road, we're working, we've set a tentative June 4th opening with the governor being down. So progress is being made. If you've been down there lately, it's happening, and that's always good news for me. Some of the facts that's went on this first 4 months is starting with the road department. They've graded about 635 miles of roads. They've brush hogged about 262 miles. But the most outstanding thing, they've placed 30,000 plus cubic yards of gravel and stone on our roads. And I know some of you JPs that have been driving the roads can see the impact there, and we're very proud of that achievement in the first 4 months, way ahead of schedule of what we put down last year. We're going to begin our chip and seal program around the 15th of May, and followed by our asphalt program. Potholes has been on everybody's mind. We've tried a couple of subcontractors. They didn't get the production, so we leaned on the sheriff, and we have some people from the sheriff's department formed a crew, and we're going to just address them ourselves and get them as fast as we can. And we're really happy that we've got cooperation with him about it. I guess the deputies have been talking about potholes also. Some question about the bus routes. We now have them mapped, and we're started with our team of planners and with Northwest Planning, Regional Planning, on prioritizing the bus routes and getting those back into shape as soon as possible. The animal shelter, 103 animals out for adoption, out of state, which is a good word. Environmental, we had the first half day of our spring countywide cleanup this last month. 92 tons of trash was hauled to waste management. This is part of it. That was about twice of what we'd had the year before on the half-day. We have 2 additional days, which will be in May. So it's working. We're averaging about 4 roadside dumps a week of picking those up. And primarily, when I look at the pictures, and you're getting the pictures, it's used tires. That seems to be the thing. And we picked up one this month that had 40 tires in one place. Now, that's not somebody just dropping off 2 or 3 tires. That's an organized thing. So we're trying to find the source of that, and they're investigating that. Our grants department have received 4 grants totaling $788,000 so far this year, which is out above our normal for this first period of the year, because grants usually come in the second and third quarter. So we're planning a good year there. Planning department, we've, as you all are aware of the number of appeals that we're having, we're really looking, and Brian and myself and our administration staff, as well as the planning staff, at how to streamline this planning procedure policy so that we can minimize the appeals we have and satisfy our public and all of our constituents in the county. We can't continue to go through all the processes and then have a judge decide our fate at a later date. So we're looking at how we can solve this problem, and that's a tremendous problem to us. We have some suggestions, but right at the beginning, they all, like most suggestions, there's always a fallacy of how you can shortcut something due to the laws and the regulations and transparency. JDC is on course. One of the things that's happening at JDC is she's running high this year for the year before, and we don't really, Ms. Judy Mack says she don't really know the reason for that, but she's getting more juveniles in. And I really hope that takes a turn down. She and I have been discussing it, and it's just continues to be right at the edge of her capacity. The emergency department, John Luther's group, thank goodness we haven't had a major flood, a major tornado in our county, and we got through April. Normally we'll have 1 or 2 in the first 4 months that will hit somewhere in our county, so we'll knock on wood on that one. We've had a real mild April, and we'll pray for May being the same. Controller's department, they're in the middle of the audit, but the big and exciting thing about them is they have now reached the agreement on the SunGuard contract and upgrade, and we've got those figures in. As some of you may be aware, our system has been neglected for about five years in the past without any upgrading, and so that escalated the cost. You got a factor where you've been saving for the last 5 years, but now someone you have to pay. So, but we've got that worked out, and they really diligently researched it, giving us abilities to do some things that we didn't think we were going to get to do, for as time clock. And one of the things that's really big is there were limitations on some of the items that we could charge correctly, but they've really got it where they wanted it. We thank the controllers and the IT department for really getting into this and getting to the ground roots and see if we get it. Buildings and grounds, those guys have been working. Of course, a major project is the CSU building renovation. They have did some retrofit over at the co-op building. The old courthouse bell tower is under construction. One of these days we'll be able to ring the bell again down there. And of course the judge at the old courthouse says, please don't ring it every hour. So we were thinking about just ringing it at noon to satisfy that. Archives. Just got word from Tony. Yes,
We're gonna fix the clock
Mike?
courthouse.
yes, it's running. It's on time.
Well, it hasn't been on time. Sunday it wasn't on time.
Which side? One
The
side's
south
on,
side.
south side's off time. North
Yeah,
side's on time. That's the side I'm on. But yes, we're going to work on the clock.
Okay, go ahead.
Archives, he has just now, with the help of IT, got to do our land records and search data. What this means is that he can go back in, do the search, and he says this is going to be a mammoth project to get the old records correct. He says there's numerous mistakes, misspellings, and various things as the old titles were exchanged in the past to give a complete trace, which means to us that in the future in Washington County, you'll be able to get a clean abstract on some lands that you couldn't before. And if you have farmland or go back to homestead, why, this is very important to each one of us landowners. Purchasing continues on contracts. HR has been very busy. We interview about 10 guys and we get 2 in the road department. We interview I was just talking with the sheriff and he's interviewed about 20 and got 10 and said 4 will probably make it through school. So personnel and hiring is keeping the HR department really, really working. Veteran Services. Talked to Josh. He's over 800 this year so far. Ran 240 this past month.
Wow.
And didn't count today and tomorrow.
Wow.
Library. Major thing that happened is the grand opening of the Prairie Grove Library. That's the largest library outside of Fayetteville in the county.
Wow.
Yeah, they got the old Walmart neighborhood market there, and it's a fabulous thing. If you haven't been out there, I don't know if you've seen it or to the opening, but it's something, and it's something to do with these old derelict Walmart stores, I guess. IT, as I've said, and one of the things that IT's major project has been, if you haven't seen these are your key to get in. Brian was a leader in this, and he saw the need for it. I like it. We all like it from the standpoint we can tell who you are and how to get in. One of the problems here with all the courts going on, a person looks like they're so regular, some of these people going to court, that you think they work here. But if they're not badged, they don't work. And that about winds up a quick run around we are.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Gills? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just want to say thanks for a lot of the road work. I'm getting a lot of comments from all over, and they're really bragging on the road department. But don't quit.
Well, we're not quitting, and I tell everybody, Willie's really working out there in his department, and we're really looking to make him look good.
Well, I don't need to look good. Another thing you need to mention about John Luther, he's been doing school training now, a lot of school training. And
Yes.
that's been very important to, if everybody don't know, I mean, he's been doing the shooter active and training in schools, and it's really,
Stop the Bleeding,
yep.
on the Stop the Bleeding program last year, and the greatest success we had is one of our county employees had took that course, and there was a major wreck from a citizen out south here, and he applied that Stop the Bleeding, and the emergency unit said he saved that man's life. So that's worth all the training that we could possibly do.
And I went and looked at your Brush Creek Bridge. It's still on schedule. It looks good out there.
80% on schedule. We're going to say you can drive across it in 4th of July.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I went out.
Good contractor, doing good. We'll do our approaches, their time re-steel and getting ready for the deck.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pond?
Yeah, I just wanted to say basically what Willie did. I'm getting compliments on the road work. and some of them are coming from people that in the past have done a lot of complaining. I'm not just getting comments, I'm getting compliments.
We appreciate those, and we really do. You know, we represent each one of you, and we want each one of you to get the compliments because you're the backbone behind us, and that's, we tell them, you know, without the JPs, well, we can't function because you fund us and you support us.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Oh, you through? Okay. Ms. Ann, go ahead.
I wished everybody on the court could go out to Trace Branch and see that the work, what the county road department is doing out there, because it's hilly and the ditches and everything, and they're putting these rocks in and everything, and I don't know what the term is for that, but it's going to prevent a lot of erosion. They're doing a great. You just need to drive out to Trace Branch and see what's going on. They're doing a great job out there. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Judge Beaumont had asked me about the state of disrepair in the basement at the historic courthouse. She was really concerned about that. What's going on there? She's afraid the building might fall down.
Well, we've looked at it, and it like the old building has always had some movement, and we're just monitoring it right at the present. We don't feel like it right now there'd be a complete failure, but we've been watching it for ever since I've been in.
What is the problem?
It's on the side of the hill, and the old building just settles and moves. So it's a clay hill.
Doesn't sound good.
Well, most of Fayetteville residents are the same way. They're on side hill. This is a difficult town to build on because it's so adverse in elevations, and it has seams of heavy clays and rock, and it moves, it swells, it goes up and down.
Well, so was that issue not addressed in the fairly recent renovation that we're still paying off? Do you know?
I did not see where they addressed that in that renovations. And I've looked at the settlements on some of the floors down there, and like I say, there is ways to fix it, and we'll address it as we see. Most usually it settles in the dry periods and swells back up in the wet and up and down. And that's the nature of these type of buildings. And it slides always downhill a little bit every time.
What's going to be the permanent home of the Emergency Operations Center?
The Emergency Operations Center is looking at some expanded building out at their original operation at the annex, and we'll be coming forth not this year but next year with looking at their permanent home. We're looking right now and applying and trying to find a grant so that we can have a combination of a community storm shelter out there under their upper facility, and that would offset a lot of that cost.
So they won't stay at the annex, but you're going to look to expand the annex? Did I hear that right?
No. The annex, we won't expand over here. We're looking at, they have a metal building out at the south complex.
Okay.
And we're looking at expanding that building by putting an underground storm shelter. It's a side hill there, and the terrain naturally falls off, and if we can there is grants available for community storm shelters, and that's what we're applying for, trying to get one.
Do they have a backup generator yet at the annex?
Yes, they do.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Good news. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Gales, I have a question.
No answer.
Would you tell us about the prisoners' use in the pothole filling? What's the deal there?
Well, it's, we have secured the use of 2 to 4 prisoners daily during our work week, and worked on a crew, and we've been gearing up for a week with, when you work them, they have certain privileges and rights, and we have to address portable toilet facilities, proper lunches, and et cetera. So it took us a week to get in place, and they went out the first day today. And so I don't have a report on how many potholes they fixed today, but I will tomorrow.
Well, any help is a big help.
Yes. We have about 2,000, and we're into around 400 of them that we've repaired.
Okay. Well, one other question, could you provide a little bit more detail about kind of what you're planning on the bus routes?
Well, the bus routes, we're looking at first identifying the bus routes, identifying those that are the type of road. And our first look will be the narrow roads, our unpaved narrow roads, or even our unpaved, our chip and seal roads that are too narrow for proper, and widening those sections. And we're going to have to approach that sort of like we do the potholes. Let's get the buses where they can travel whatever road it is with proper width. And a lot of that has to do with trees, getting them off the shoulders and of the roads, and clearing and getting sight distance for our buses. But that's, we're really getting into, first we've identified them. And there's a lot of bus routes, but that's where we're going with that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Does that include the roads out by Heritage Farms? By Heritage Farms off of Weddington, where the bus routes?
Wherever it's a bus route, we're including.
Have you said you've identified some of those places already? Would
Well,
that include that?
we're mapping right at the present, getting those down, and then we're going through with we have a system where we have a group that drives all of the roads and gives us an analysis of it, and tells us so we can identify and get it down. We don't have the money in the budget to fix all of them, so we're going to have to talk in terms of like the 12-foot wide ones and the ones that you drive on.
I have a couple of those.
Yeah, and I know those roads
And they're not
out there.
fun,
And
especially when you're coming
the
on
ones
to
where you just
oncoming
can't
traffic.
pass. We got to get it to where our
The
buses
shoulder.
and our fire trucks can pass each
Right.
other.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep. This has been a long-term process.
Or it will be, yeah.
Do you have any idea how many miles are involved in those bus routes at this point?
No, I don't.
But a lot of them.
Yeah, seems like every road we got a bus runs on.
Okay. Can you?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If you get an airplane fly around Washington County, there's homes everywhere you look, every corner. So every road's accounting for that, but he ain't gonna be able to fix them all. There's no way. County Road 2, he could spend a year down there fixing it at Morrow. I mean, half of that road you can't even get down.
Right.
I was just gonna touch on the guys fixing the potholes. Just make sure everybody understands that they just don't take the gentleman out of the jail and the jailers go do it. They have to have a county truck, they have to have county
no,
employees,
yeah,
they have to have county police to go with them,
Yeah.
and a porta trotty. So it's not just a perfect scenario, but it works pretty good, because we've used them on the fire departments to do stuff, and you have to have people watching them, and I just want to make sure everybody understood, there was a little bit more to that. than
Right,
just-
and it took us a week to get that little bit more to
Right.
get ready.
Yeah.
So,
But I love it.
I think it'll
If
be
I
a
could-
great deal, because we used to pothole a lot like that, and it'll work good.
Yeah.
What kind of mix you using? You using black base or you using the
Black base.
pothole mix?
Pothole. He's got the mixture, they're making it out there, that standard black pothole mix.
There you go. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. I'd like one other question. Can you give us a little bit of update, kind of what you guys are looking at relative to any modification of our CUP process?
Well, that's, like I say, we're working on it right at the present. As I've said, we've got a lot of suggestions, but the primary thing that, as you all know, is that we're going through the process. Our people that are applying are spending a lot of money, engineering and whatsoever, but we're getting down to the public issue last. We need to address, is this going to be a compatible location? And we've got to figure out, and there's lots of rules and laws of how you got to do this, to where that it actually works. Are we we will do the entire process, but we're out of sync in my mind of how it's coming about.
How many lawsuits have we got pending, or have we been dealing with?
We've got 4 right now. The 5th one, we had 5, and one of them got settled, which is out the wedding chapel. But we've got 4, and Brian may correct me if that's not the right number. He's going through it in his mind. He's got his eyes closed. Yeah.
Well, did the ones, did the wedding chapel cost us $35,000-$40,000?
20, not at 20.
20,000? I thought I remembered a lot more than that.
Okay.
But anyway, then we have all these others. But you know, Mr. Gales, one of the things I think that I've dealt with is, it seems it's so cumbersome. And I remember Steve Jobs has always said, there's got to be a better way. And we're going through all this public outcry and going through multiple meetings. And I don't know whether there's some way we can do this so that the public is involved in the process way earlier. But it seems that regardless of what decision we make, we stand to get sued. And I think that's a ineffective way to deal with the situation, for us to constantly be in the battle with either person involved in the process. And so I just hope we can figure out some kind of way to resolve that issue, that take us off the target. So we're always at the firing range and we're receiving the fire.
Well, we are going outside of the county, talking with the other counties, talking with our regional planners, and looking at all of our towns cities of what they're actually doing, because this is an unusual number to happen. And I don't know at the past, but I don't believe that any of the courts in the past have faced this number in a row.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing of it is, with all the growth of population in this area, we know we're going to continue to see more intense growth and more challenges all along the way.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
The, mentioning looking at other counties, and you might know, since you've been looking, I'm just curious, how many counties in Arkansas, counting Washington County, actually has county-wide zoning? So I was thinking it was, how many is it?
How many actually have? 3, I believe. Is that correct, Brian?
Crittenden County possibly is one of them.
Crittenden County, over at Memphis area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Crittenden County was probably the first one that was zoned.
Right, and then Sebastian, Benton, Pulaski.
The 4 largest ones.
Well,
Thank you.
it just appears to me that as the population continues to grow up here, and it looks like it's going to be continuing for some time, that we're going to have more and more of these challenges. And I just feel like we got to somehow find a better way to handle the situation and reduce the amount of time that we deal with it and improve the process. So
That's our goal.
So anything we can do to help, well, please let us know. Any other questions for Mr. Gales? Okay. Can we move on? Next, we have the ordinance establishing a minimum standard for habitual residents. Go ahead, Ms. Sue. Would you go ahead and tell us about this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for my tardiness. First, let me say it's not my intention to ask for any kind of vote on this tonight. This is just a first step. I'd like to get some feedback and see what other people think. The legislature has just adjourned, and there have been attempts to establish some minimum standards of habitability since before I tried the first time. And this is embarrassingly simple. And it's patterned after one I did try when I was in the Senate, which I was able to get out of the Senate, but clogged up in House Committee. And it was late in the session.
Okay.
And many of the standards that you see here, as a landlord, I was fairly careful about not putting the responsibility on the landlord to go check the smoke detector monthly, or to make sure the gas bill was paid, or to make sure the water was paid, but just that the landlord had provided those things, such as a door that locks. Now, if the tenant tears the lock up, you know, how would we even know necessarily? Whether or not everybody has really clued into this or not, we have a real outgrowth of sort of a burst of vacation rentals happening across this country. Airbnb and VRBO are the primary websites for those. And we have folks who'll leave their home for a football game weekend and let strangers come stay there because the money's really good. And most of those homes, we assume, are in pretty good shape. But there are instances where people are renting out their garage. They may not have a door or window to the outside. When I was campaigning last fall, I knocked on a door, and this was in Fayetteville where the ordinance wouldn't apply. Nobody answered the door, but I could hear folks in the backyard, so I just walked around back. And there were some young folks back there, hard at work, clearing out what had been a utility shed. And I said, "Oh, good for you," or something like that. "Yeah, we think we might be able to rent it out now that Fayetteville has this accessory dwelling unit." And because of the truly tragic fire that had happened in what was once my Senate district, that's now J.B. Harbison's Quorum Court district, there was a fire out in the county, and Mitch McCorkle was the fire chief in West Fork, and they responded to that fire. And he was the one that I talked to about this legislation. The front door was blocked, and the firefighters couldn't get in that way, and children were sleeping in a room that had no door or window to the outside, and the children died. And I know that sometimes rental housing can be tight around here, and folks may end up renting in a place where they didn't really want to rent, but that was all the money they had. And one of the arguments I often heard was, well, people don't have to rent there. They don't have to live there. They can choose to go somewhere else. But remember, children don't get to choose. Children have to live where their parents live, for the most part. And in that case, it was children that died. So that's what I tried to take care of. And I think even within the city of Fayetteville, there may not be requirements for smoke alarms, except in new construction. Now, mine have smoke alarms. My houses were built in the 60s, and we didn't have smoke alarms in the 60s. So there's things like a smoke alarm that works, an entry door that you can open and close. And this is the key part to me, an operable door or window leading to the outside for every sleeping room. So that if we have people sleeping in a room, they're not in a utility shed, they're not in the pantry or a storeroom, they're in a room that they can get out of. And then an available source of electricity. I don't think that shed was going to have electricity. A source of potable drinking water. Wastewater connected to a disposal system that meets sanitary standards by the health department. A source of hot and cold running water. And so people can see in if they need to, either glass or clear plexiglass covering the windows, not cardboard or newspapers when it breaks. So, and then there are provisions in here that, you know, sometimes the tenant will say, you know, if you'll let me have the first couple of months' rent at half price, I'll do X, Y, and Z to improve the house for you. So there's provision for a tenant to be able to work out that agreement with the landlord. And I was careful to say, you know, just because the front door lock doesn't work for a weekend doesn't mean you don't have to pay the rent. So I'd just appreciate some feedback on this. And Arkansas is one of the few states that has no minimum standards. Mm-hmm. And in our area, we have a lot of tenants. a lot of renters.
I
And
guess,
we want to keep them safe. Thank you.
Ms. Madison, I guess my first question is, it occurs to me that trailer houses are very common rental units out in the county or around the place. And, there's no windows access through the bedroom doors, through the bedroom windows of the trailer house. And that's a very common situation with rental of trailer houses. And that would completely preclude the function there.
Most of the mobile homes I've been in lately did have
Well,
windows.
The ones I've seen, the windows
They're-
are small.
They're kind of small, but
They're
I
very
bet you a
small.
firefighter can get in one.
Yeah.
Might take a skinny firefighter.
Light pole go through the wall faster than you go through the window.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I've got a number of issues. Does some of y'all want to ask questions or make comments about this? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Mann?
I don't think anyone in this court will argue with the standards that you have come forth with. These are very minimum standards for a rental. My issue with that would be the enforcement of it. I think, saying this is what you need to do is fine, but, I don't think the quorum court has the people or the sheriff's department or anyone else the authority to enforce this. And that's my only issue with it. There's not one thing in here I disagree with. How could anyone disagree with this? But it's the enforcement issue that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Mr. Leming?
Another question you said there, the city of Fayetteville, that's Washington County. So with all of the cities in their planning area, the city rules be theirs, and then we would just deal with Washington County out in the rule?
Well, I defer to our county attorney, but I believe that is the way it would work.
Because there's a lot
It
of,
would just be the rural area.
Lincoln's just cleaned up a great big mess. It's the same situation, and we got another one there we're trying to get cleaned up, and it's a lot of these stuff is state laws and state rules already. The health department can't come out and, that's how I get, when I have trouble and I go in as a fire department, if I have trouble, I call the health department. I can get it took care of pretty quick.
Well, they'll respond to complaints, perhaps.
I see a lot
But they're
of
not
problems.
doing anything proactively, I guess you might say. And I've struggled with the enforcement issue, but the bill I had in the legislature didn't have any enforcement. I'm not sure that all of the county ordinances that we have now have enforcement. But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be some obligation for a person to try to abide by it. I'm sure Lindsay Management has apartments that are in unincorporated areas, and I'm sure they would try very hard to comply with everything in here.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I sent a copy to one of their management folks and haven't had a reply.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see if I do this right, Brian. I'd like to make a motion to amend the ordinance to include my name as co-sponsor. Is that it? I did. Is that okay?
All right.
Okay.
Any other comments?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've owned way more rental property than I want to own at times. And I struggle with all these issues. And first I went and looked, and the state of Arkansas publishes a book. Chapter 1 in this book says, and I'm not an attorney, but it says the law in Arkansas is caveat lessee, which I think it says means that the lessee needs to beware. And I know a lot of very good landlords, and I know there's a lot of very good tenants, and there's a lot of poor landlords, and there's a lot of poor tenants. And I mean, I've had people leave property of mine in a shape that I wouldn't even let the people I hire clean it up. I went and did it myself. It was so bad. So this is a two-way street, and it's my belief that the people that may be helped by this information would never ever see it or know it. I mean, the good landlords don't need it. The people that have educated themselves on how to lease a property don't need it, and the rest of them will never see it. So I don't think we're going to accomplish a lot with this.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Yes,
May I
sir.
just respond a little bit?
Yeah.
I think I've had some experiences both ways. To this day, I have one couple that I always refer to as my perfect tenants, and we all know who I'm talking about because there's only been one such set. And my children have cleaned up some horrible messes behind tenants, so I know that. But what always comes back to me is when those folks have kids and when there are children there. And I think if we have some ordinances on the books that people can look to and say to the landlord, you know, Washington County says I should have a front door that opens and closes, or I should have a smoke detector, or why don't I have any heat in the winter? Then a landlord would at least have some obligation. I mean, we're not going to put him in jail. We're not going to fine him $100, him or her. But there would be something that says, here are the standards we have in Washington County, because we want to protect people who come to us as tenants. And tenants are often young, inexperienced people with children. And with the situation now in Washington County, we have a lot of doubling up. In Fayetteville, a single-family residential neighborhood cannot have more than 3 unrelated people. Well, you know, if somebody's got a 5-bedroom house, they're probably leasing it to 5 college folks. So there is a lot of that doubling up going on. Some of that happens with multiple families in a house. I mean, we can call code enforcement, but the rental market here is, I mean, we wouldn't be booming in construction. Now, I think my colleague would probably know better than I do that when you build a house new, there are all kinds of standards you have to meet to get a certificate of occupancy, but then that's the only inspection that's ever done, I think, or the only checklist that's ever provided.
Yeah, and the way this is written, if we could do something, this isn't even written to meet the minimum building standard. So if we're gonna, why do it if we can't even do that? And I've seen too many situations, but if you get a bunch of kids in the family, who says they're gonna sleep in a bedroom? I mean, you could have every bedroom in the house could have the right size window, but they may not be sleeping in the bedroom. Today, you have a smoke detector in every bedroom and outside in the hallway, outside of every bedroom. They're all hardwired together, and you don't want to be there when we test them. Because if you can sleep through it, you got another problem.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
As I recall, some years back, Washington County has already adopted as a standard the International Building Code. But that being said, I do have a question for the county attorney.
All right.
It might not necessarily have to be answered this evening, but I would like to know what this ordinance would cause Washington County to be liable for if this ordinance were passed.
I don't think it would put any liability on the county. I mean, this ordinance is, you know, like J.P. Madison said, it's not calling for enforcement or anything, so it's not putting anything on the county to actually go out. Even if it did, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have liability in it. But I think as written, I don't think there is any particular liability placed on the county other than hey, we want landlords to know that these are the things we want them to have to ensure that they have in their homes if they're renting.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the liability to the landlord? I mean, if we pass these are very minimum standards, but let's say there's a fire or something, somebody loses their life, then what is, since this is on our books as an ordinance, even though it doesn't have any enforcement regulations with it, what is the liability to the landlord? Since it's a law or an ordinance, and an ordinance is a county law.
I don't know that changes a landlord's liability. It may enhance liability. I mean, there may be an argument, that's a civil matter, and that'd be something to argue on to a court that maybe a landlord knew or should have known that they should have these things. But again, it's hard to say what that is because that would change with every single situation. I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, so to speak.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am.
I mean, you asked the question, thank you. You asked the question, why do this? And I think about, I am a landlord, but I also have a very young son who's 21 years old and married and is living at a poverty level. And I think about he and his young wife living in an apartment where they went several months this winter without heat. And the landlord, they didn't know, they were too young to ask anyone for help. Their landlords weren't willing to do anything to help them. And so I really feel like that's, when you ask why we do this, it's to protect those people, the people that are most vulnerable, the people living in poverty, the people that don't have a voice, is giving them a minimum expectation for our living standards here. I think this is great. I think that this is something that we really need.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one more story to tell.
Sorry?
I have one more story to tell, if you'll just indulge me. When I first ran for the legislature, my district, I think that's right, included Durham. Do you represent Durham? Who represents Durham? Butch does. Butch does, okay. In downtown Durham, there are 3 abodes. I struggled. And being the aggressive campaigner that I was, I knocked on the doors. I think I probably got them registered to vote. Those were rental dwellings. There was a hole in the wall from one of them, from the inside, which was sort of the great room, to the outside. I mean, there were no studs or that kind of thing, just a wood wall that was patched with cardboard. And there'd been some new activity in these 3 dwelling units. The health department had recently made them put in new outhouses.
Put in what?
The health department had recently made the landlord build new outhouses. Now, I know to the young people it was a century ago that I first got elected to the legislature, but that was in '94 I first ran. And '94 was not really the dark ages. But here in Washington County, as an acceptable bathroom facility, we had 3 dwellings in Washington County with brand-new outhouses. And I hope that's still not the case. I've had a call into the current county health department supervisor and haven't heard back from him, but we don't know what all goes on out there.
Yes, sir.
I do have one other question. Would this ordinance prevent a landowner to allow someone to live on their property, in their properties rent-free? In other words, is this gonna put people out in the cold that have no place if they could live there rent-free?
I probably think our county attorney should answer that, but I think there's a different relationship when it's landlord-tenant and when the exchange of money is involved. I mean, if you take in a person from Seven Hills and decide they can spend the night in your barn, that's a humanitarian effort on your part. But the landlord-tenant relationship, where there's money involved, is a different situation to my mind. And if you want language in here that makes it clear that if you're taking in a homeless person, you're exempt, I think that would certainly be an amendment I'd like to see myself.
Okay, I guess I have a mixed feeling about this thing. I understand your concern. I guess number one is, how do you identify infractions in this situation? And if you find infractions, do we have some kind of responsibility to go and try to mitigate that ourselves? And if we do, there's no penalties and no fines or anything of the kind that can be imposed if the standards are not met. And I guess, I think anytime we start passing ordinances that don't have some teeth in them or don't have some pertinent application, that we're building up more red tape out here to have to deal with in the county. And we know that, I've seen an awful lot of upgrading of old facilities recently with people coming in here. They're doing, landowners or property owners are trying to do everything they can to maximize their rent. And so I think that we got two big problems here. Number one, a lot of young folks and a lot of even old folks that's not made good choices wind up in tents. And I was back in California a while back and drove through some major cities and saw hundreds of tents with people backed up against buildings and fences and everything else, and everything you can imagine. I think I saw on TV this week, they got one city out there that's having high-pressure hoses going out washing human waste off the streets and sidewalks. And as we continue to push requirements and so forth, we're going to put fewer and fewer people in a situation where they can afford facilities they can afford. I think the city's doing a fantastic job. I think Northwest Arkansas is doing a fantastic job reaching out to try to help the poor. And I've never seen a place that had more freebies and great things out here to assist. So personally, I'd prefer that we not pass this ordinance, because I think it's just further encumbering people out here with guidelines that don't have any teeth, nor an easy way to identify infractions. So I guess that's my perspective on it, but if you have a motion or something, okay, well, the other thing I wanted to ask is, this is set up as an emergency ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's because the Senate bill I had an emergency clause. Back then, I think nearly every bill had an emergency clause, which meant it went into effect
Okay, all right.
upon adjournment.
Okay.
And now, like, we're waiting on some of the new legislation to take effect.
Okay,
I think the courts ruled that they weren't all really emergencies, so this
Okay,
is just
all
a holdover from
all
that
right, so
previous bill.
what are you asking we do doing that?
I just wanted some discussion on it tonight.
Okay.
That's all
right.
I wanted.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hickey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From experience working with Justice Madison, Sue Madison, she has a big heart when it comes to people and helping those that can't or need a hand up, and you are to be commended. This is your heart. It really is. I'd like to see a little bit more research done on what other counties are doing, perhaps, that have implemented something like this. What are they doing and how they're putting this into action? But I also know that you can't legislate morality. You're going to have bad landowners, good landowners. People that do bad things are going to do very bad things because that's what they like to do. But then there are good people that like to do very good things, and they will continue to do good things, and that cannot be legislated.
That's true.
That I know. So it's a choice. But I know if we all are good citizens and show others the example, hopefully they will aspire to be just like that. So, thank you.
ma'am. Mr. Pines, you have something to say? I thought you indicated you wanted to speak. Okay,
Oh, no.
okay, all right,
Justice Madison,
all right.
Harbison.
Go ahead, yeah.
I probably have seen more deplorable living conditions than anybody in this room.
I don't think so.
Oh, I believe so. Well, I've seen them living in chicken houses with a wood stove in the middle, and
Wood stove.
it's, they did have heat, but no water, no electricity, no whatever. I mean, we can pass this, but I think this kind of thing has to be left up to a community to look at and help those people in situations. I mean, I don't think this is going to do anything. It makes this look like we don't care if we don't vote for it, but if we're not going to, if there's no enforcement, because it'll pass and it might be in the newspaper for a couple of days and that's it. It goes in the, wherever ordinances go, and that's it. So, you know, it's a good ordinance in that it addresses issues that need to be addressed. But, anyway, I don't know. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Leming.
I know you said you've seen a lot of bad things, but for 39 years on the volunteer fire department, and we talk about rentals, a lot of this stuff, I can take you out in the woods right now and show you a lot of stuff. It's mom and dad's home, then you got a son and a daughter over here, and they got extension cords running across the field. They've got buckets they use for the restrooms. You can't control what people do. You can't change their lives. People's going to live the way they want to live. There's a lot of good in this, because I know where there's a ton of homes that don't have fire alarms in them. I've been in every situation you can be in the fire service, I promise you. I've seen a lot of trash. We just tore an apartment down that was full of kids, full of cockroaches, full of no windows, full of no fans. It was a mess. We got the health department, we got the state in there, we got it tore up, we got it threw away. But them people don't have to live there. Them people's got the options to live anywhere in this world they want to live. And I understand young kids and young boys and young girls, mom and dad, you should have raised them better. Mom and dad, you should have talked to them. I mean, we can't hold everybody's hand. I mean, it's sad, but it's just the way it is. We can't govern everybody. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad, he died when I was 10 years old, and I learned better to live like that. You was talking about outhouses. That's where my aunt and uncle I lived with for years had an outhouse. They ain't no big deal. I mean, it's just life. We just got to move on. Thank you.
Eva, Miss Eva, just a minute. Eva spoke next. Go ahead.
I guess I'm a little frustrated that everybody's like, oh, this is not going to do any good. We just might as well not do. You can't help people. And here's my thing. If you set minimum standards, which I think we all agree are what everybody should have the benefit of living with, if this helps one child or two young people moving into their first apartment, we will have helped. Who cares if there's not an enforcement mechanism? The reason it doesn't have an enforcement mechanism is because we don't have the resources to enforce it. But not having an enforcement mechanism is not a reason not to do it. Lawyers will take note of it. People who pay attention will take note of it. And then maybe JP Hires' son and daughter-in-law, who were in a situation where they would have benefited from this, maybe by asking a few questions, they'd find out. They could go to their landlord and say, do you know there's a Washington County ordinance that says we're supposed to have heat? That's enforcement right there. And then if they go to court over a dispute with their landlord, the ordinance will be there. And it will matter to a judge that that landlord is ignoring the minimum standards that we, this community of JPs that represent the entire county, decided it's the society we want to live in. So don't not vote for this or support this because you're worried it won't do any good. If it helps one child, we will have done something and we will have helped one child. So I would ask that my name be added as a sponsor.
Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This book will do a whole lot of good for a whole lot of people. This explains it all. This is what the law says the landlord's got to do and what the tenant's got to do. So it's out there and it's available, and anybody wants this one can have one. I'll get another one.
Okay.
The other thing is that the Constitution gives us a whole list of things, that not a whole list, it's a short list, about 5 items the county shall do. I'm a little concerned. We don't have the funds and the resources to do the things the Constitution says we shall do. I'm a little afraid of stepping too far away from that.
Okay. You know, I'd like to make one comment here I think is really important. We all remember. You know what? This court is made up of 15 very independent, very passionate people who have a different perspective on all kinds of things in our lives. But we've got to realize that every one of us have opinions, and what we've got to do is vote our conscience on each one of these situations. And so, you know, I'm going to ask that we all respect each other and are very civil about these kind of things and vote. And hopefully we'll all leave here friends regardless of how the decision goes. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We're not making a decision tonight. I want to work on this more, so everybody's off the hook for tonight.
All right.
But if I could just respond to these latest comments, and then how about we finish?
All right.
I know that lots of people live in places that they choose to live in that most of us wouldn't want to live in. I've been in those homes. Some of them you can't really walk through the home to get from one room to the next for various reasons. But this is talking about when people collect money for those places. You know, where Joe and Mary Jones want to live, and Mary's got everything she ever owned since she was 5 years old in the house. That's their business. I'm talking about when a landlord charges people money for the places that don't meet minimum standards.
Okay. Are we
Thank
through? Okay. Well, let's move on to the next thing, the public comments. We have any public comments?
Come on, everybody.
Okay, have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.